In a courtroom, where justice is meant to prevail, what happens when the scales of power tip in unexpected ways? This question lingers as we delve into a story that uncovers the complex dynamics of race, authority, and personal power. In moments like these, the roles of victim and victor blur, revealing truths that even the most hardened systems cannot suppress. Today, we explore an incident that seemed to be just another case of a simple fine, but beneath the surface, it became a collision of ideologies, belief systems, and, ultimately, transformation. Let's step into the courtroom, where the clash of power begins. On one side, we have a black woman, poised yet firm, standing before a judge, a representation of the law, the system, and the authority she's been taught to respect. But her story is one of resilience, of a woman who has lived through more than her share of challenges, and yet remains unbroken. She enters this space, not as a victim, but as someone who knows the weight of the words justice and truth. Her calm demeanor masks the strength within her, a power that is both quietly unyielding and rooted in experiences that only someone like her could truly understand. On the other side stands the judge, a man who wears the mantle of authority with ease. His years of experience have cemented his place in the legal world, and his decisions are often viewed as final. But what this man does not realize is that the woman standing before him is about to challenge more than just his ruling. She is about to challenge his entire perception of power, justice, and race. The case before them seems straightforward at first, an issue that could be easily dismissed with a fine. Yet, as the words are spoken, something shifts. The stakes are much higher than anyone initially imagined. The judge, in his attempt to uphold the law, imposes a fine. But this is not just any fine. The woman, in her quiet way, embodies more than just the legal violation. She represents a much larger narrative of systemic injustice, of centuries of oppression, and of a power dynamic that is often overlooked. As the judge delivers his verdict, the woman's reaction speaks volumes. What appears to be submission is in fact a calculated moment of restraint. She knows the consequences of resistance in this system, but her actions will soon reveal that she has much more power than the judge has accounted for. The power she wields is not just the power of defiance, it is the power of truth, of history, and of a lived experience that the judge has never known. In this charged moment, both the judge and the woman are unknowingly on the precipice of a transformative journey. The woman's quiet strength, rooted in the complexities of her identity, and the judge's authority, shaped by his privilege, are about to collide in a way that will force both of them to confront not just the case at hand, but the deep-seated structures that govern their worldviews. As the courtroom settles into tense silence, the question looms larger than ever. How will this seemingly small incident unfold into something that shifts both of their lives forever? And what truths will come to light when the judge discovers the true extent of the woman's power? In the coming sections, we will explore the heart of this unfolding story, a story that challenges us all to question the balance of power, the assumptions we make about others, and the forces that often lie just beneath the surface of our everyday lives. The courtroom is quiet, a stark contrast to the tension building in the air. The polished wood of the benches and the gleaming metal of the judge's gavel offer a sense of order, a visual representation of the law's supposed impartiality. Yet beneath the surface, there's a different reality. This is not just a place where legal matters are settled. It is a battleground for power, history, and the unspoken biases that linger in every corner. The black woman stands before the judge, a figure who seems out of place in the cold, whitewashed environment of the courtroom. She is alone in her defense, dressed modestly, but with an aura of dignity that makes her stand apart. Her eyes are sharp, filled with experience that the judge cannot begin to understand. She has lived a life shaped by struggles far deeper than any case of misdeeds the law might have found her guilty of. In her late 30s, she's a woman who has fought battles both visible and hidden, facing oppression in its many forms, navigating the subtle racism and systemic barriers that make even the simplest moments of life seem like extraordinary feats. She stands there, having been fined for a minor violation that many would consider insignificant, a charge she knows is a result of a much larger societal imbalance. The judge, an older white man in his late 50s, sits at his high bench, surveying the room through spectacles perched on the tip of his nose. His face is stern, his expression one of practiced indifference. To him, this case is no more than another minor infraction to process, another day in the courtroom where justice is delivered with little thought. In his eyes, the woman before him represents a problem to be solved, a person who must face the consequences of her actions. He doesn't know her, nor does he care to know her. He only sees the case in front of him, an act of defiance, one that must be corrected by the letter of the law. His decision to impose a fine on her is swift, almost automatic. He doesn't question it, doesn't second-guess the justification for such an action. For him, the rules are clear. The law is black and white. The violation, though small, is punishable. The woman's situation is straightforward. Her fine is a formality, a necessary step to ensure the balance of order in the world. But what the judge doesn't see is the invisible weight that this fine carries. It's not just a penalty for a small infraction. It is the culmination of a lifetime of struggles that cannot be measured in simple terms of right and wrong. It is, for her, a reflection of a society that has long placed barriers in her path, many of which are invisible to people like the judge. He cannot see how this fine represents the culmination of years of discrimination, both overt and subtle, that she has encountered at every turn. In his eyes, she is just another offender to be reprimanded. He doesn't see her strength, her resilience, or her history. The woman's reaction to the fine is not one of surprise or anger, though she feels both in the pit of her stomach. Instead, she stands in quiet defiance, an undercurrent of power radiating from her despite her calm exterior. She knows that this moment is much bigger than a simple courtroom case. She knows that the judge's decision is rooted in biases he has never questioned, biases not just about her, but about people like her. His inability to see beyond her appearance, her skin color, and her socioeconomic status is the very thing that has shaped her response to this moment. Her posture remains steady, but her mind races. She's not defeated, not by a long shot. In this moment, she is more aware than ever of the battle she faces, not just against the law, but against a system that has long worked to strip people like her of their power and dignity. But this time, things will be different. She has learned to navigate this world with grace, but also with the quiet certainty that change is coming, and it often comes in the most unexpected ways. Her calm demeanor hides the vast depths of her knowledge, her strength, and her unspoken power. She knows that the judge will soon discover that this is not just a courtroom of legalities, but a space where personal power and history will collide. The tension is rising. The judge's mind, still clouded by his assumptions, will soon begin to unravel. There's something here, something deeper, that he doesn't yet understand. Perhaps it's something from his past, a chance encounter with a black woman from his youth, an unresolved issue, or a piece of history that ties their lives together in ways that neither of them could have imagined. The surface tension in the room will soon boil over, revealing the complex web of racial dynamics, personal histories, and biases that lie at the heart of this moment. The judge's assumptions are about to be shattered, but not by loud defiance or an overt act of rebellion. No, it will come from something quieter, more powerful, something the judge will not see coming. And as the truth begins to emerge, both he and the woman will realize that this courtroom is not just a place of justice. It is a place where truths about race, power, and personal beliefs will be laid bare. And the consequences of that truth will reverberate far beyond this one case, transforming both of their worlds in ways they never expected. The courtroom remains silent, save for the subtle shuffle of papers and the occasional cough from one of the onlookers. The tension in the air has shifted. What once felt like a simple case is now unfolding into something far more complex. The judge, seated high on his platform, adjusts his spectacles and peers over the rims at the black woman standing before him, her eyes unwavering. She does not flinch at the fine, nor does she give him the satisfaction of showing frustration. Instead, she seems to absorb the weight of the situation with a quiet grace, as though she's aware of something the judge has yet to comprehend. But in that moment, something changes in the judge. He has been accustomed to ruling from his position of authority without question. After all, his experience and education have reinforced the belief that justice is served through the letter of the law. He has never questioned the system that elevated him to the position of power, nor has he been forced to confront the biases that shape his judgments. Yet now, something nags at him, a feeling he cannot ignore. He begins to notice the subtle ways in which the woman is not just another defendant. There is something in the way she carries herself, something beneath the calm exterior that speaks of quiet power. It is not loud. It does not demand attention. It simply is, and it unsettles him. He dismisses it at first, telling himself that it is just the nerves of a person under pressure, someone who has learned to hide their true emotions behind a mask of composure. But his discomfort grows when he begins to probe deeper into the woman's background. In the days that follow the court session, he finds himself thinking about her, the case, and the bizarre sense of connection he felt the moment she stepped into the courtroom. Unable to let it go, the judge begins his investigation, pulling up her records, her history, scrutinizing her past as though it might reveal the simple truth that could explain her presence here. What he uncovers surprises him. Her name, he learns, is not unfamiliar. It is tied to something much larger than any fine could represent. Her family, he discovers, has a legacy, one that stretches far beyond the confines of the courtroom and the narrow world he thought he knew. Her ancestors were not simply survivors of the past. They were activists, advocates, and leaders in a community long forgotten by mainstream history. They had shaped the laws, fought for justice, and brought about change in ways that had never been acknowledged in official records. As he digs deeper, the judge finds that her lineage is marked by resistance and influence, a lineage that had not only challenged systemic oppression, but had done so with a profound understanding of the law and society. He reads about her great-grandfather, a man whose influence had once led to a significant legal victory that changed the course of racial justice in their state. She is connected, directly or indirectly, to figures in the civil rights movement, many of whom he had learned about in his early legal studies. How had he not known this? He had assumed her just another statistic, someone who had been caught up in the system. But now, he sees that her presence here is not coincidental. She is not just a defendant. She is part of a much larger narrative, one that challenges everything he thought he knew about power, history, and the role of the law in shaping society. At first, the judge dismisses the information. It feels too far-fetched, too loaded with implications. But the more he learns, the more the small cracks in his world begin to widen. He recalls her calm, unwavering presence in the courtroom, the slight tilt of her head when he imposed the fine, the glint of recognition in her eyes as though she knew something he did not. She was not simply submitting to the court's power. She was observing, quietly waiting for something. And then a moment comes that shakes him to his core. One afternoon, the judge receives an anonymous letter. It is brief, handwritten, and it contains only a single line. She is the one you never saw coming. Her influence goes far beyond your comprehension. But she will change you. There is no signature, no return address, only that cryptic line that lingers in the air, almost vibrating with energy. The judge dismisses the letter as a prank or a misguided attempt to sway him, but its words gnaw at him. He cannot forget them. Slowly, he begins to observe her more closely, each interaction taking on a new layer of significance. Her demeanor, the way she responds to the prosecutor, her subtle confidence. It all begins to feel like a carefully constructed strategy, a woman who has mastered the art of influence in ways that have nothing to do with wealth or social status. One day, in a moment of curiosity, the judge calls in a lawyer, a colleague he trusts, to learn more about the woman's case. As they sit together in his office, reviewing the woman's record, the lawyer remarks casually, "You know, she's not just any defendant. Her family's involvement in the legal system is well known, though it's not often talked about. Some say she's just as powerful as anyone in this room, even if her name doesn't carry the weight it should." The judge is taken aback. "What do you mean?" he asks, surprised at the implication. The lawyer hesitates, lowering his voice. "She knows the law inside and out, not just in terms of statutes, but the way it bends and breaks when needed. And she has connections, real connections. People who owe her, people who listen to her, and people who trust her. I don't know what it is, but there's something about her that doesn't fit." The judge feels the room tighten around him. He had assumed she was just another statistic, a person caught up in the system, unable to escape its grasp. But now, with each passing moment, he realizes that her power lies in something far more intangible than financial wealth or social standing. It is something deeper, a knowledge of the law, of power, of human connection that runs far beyond the world he inhabits. He begins to question himself. How could he have been so blind? How could he not have seen the signs? All the while, she had been right in front of him, showing him the very thing he had failed to recognize. True power is not always visible. It does not announce itself with loud gestures or grand displays. Sometimes it is the quietest voice in the room, the calmest presence, that holds the most sway. The revelations continue to pile up, each one breaking down another piece of the judge's carefully constructed worldview. And with each discovery, he feels the ground shifting beneath him. His assumptions, once firm and unyielding, are crumbling piece by piece. He can no longer look at her as simply a person caught up in a moment of weakness or rebellion. She is not a symbol of defiance. She is a symbol of something much more profound. The day of reckoning comes quietly, with an almost eerie sense of inevitability. The courtroom is packed, as usual, with the hum of whispers, the shuffling of feet, and the clink of metal as the judge enters and takes his seat. But today, there is an undercurrent of tension that stretches beyond the usual anticipation of a ruling. Today, something is about to shift, something far more significant than a simple legal decision. The black woman stands before the judge, a figure of quiet but undeniable strength. Her posture has not changed, but there is a new aura about her. Her presence fills the room now, not in an overpowering way, but in a way that demands respect, a quiet authority that cannot be ignored. The judge looks at her, the weight of his recent realizations heavy on his chest. He feels as though the walls are closing in, and his mind races, unable to reconcile the truth he has just uncovered with the harshness of his earlier judgment. She does not speak right away. She simply stands there, as if waiting, allowing the silence to envelop them both. But then, when the moment is ripe, she finally speaks. Her voice is calm, yet it rings with the clarity of someone who has walked a long path, someone who has borne the weight of history, of injustice, and of survival. "Judge, I understand your position," she begins, her words measured, but with an undeniable power behind them. "You see me through the lens of the law, but you must understand that I am not merely a defendant in your court. I am the continuation of a legacy of people who fought for the rights you now take for granted. The system that you uphold has been built on the backs of those who have long been ignored, dismissed, and silenced. But we are not invisible. We never were." Her words hang in the air, heavy with history, truth, and the kind of wisdom that transcends legal doctrine. The judge feels his heart rate quicken as he listens. For the first time, he hears her not just as a woman in his courtroom, but as a voice that carries the weight of centuries of struggle. He feels the truth of her words seep into his bones, and the discomfort he had once felt begins to shift. The realization that she is more than just a defendant, that she is a symbol of something much greater, begins to take root in his mind. His previous thoughts, his biases, begin to unravel. She continues, her gaze unwavering, locking eyes with him, as if willing him to see the deeper truth. You impose your judgment on me, but your power is not absolute. The law is not the only authority in this room. It never was. True justice cannot be found in the pages of legal textbooks alone. It must come from within, from understanding, from empathy, from acknowledging the very human beings who stand before you. The judge's mind reels. He had always prided himself on being a fair and just man, someone who upheld the law without question. But now, her words pierce the facade he had built around himself. He realizes that he has been blind to the ways in which his position of authority had shaped his perception. He has only seen what he wanted to see, and in doing so, he had overlooked the deeper forces at play in the world around him. The courtroom grows still, the air thick with the weight of this revelation. The judge, once confident in his ruling, now finds himself questioning everything. He glances at the woman, no longer just a defendant, but a force of nature standing before him, a mirror reflecting his own shortcomings. His chest tightens as he feels the gravity of his responsibility. The responsibility not just to uphold the law, but to ensure that justice is served in a way that acknowledges the humanity of all people. There is a moment of silence, longer than any before, and then the judge speaks, his voice low, almost apologetic. I have made a mistake, he says, the words heavy on his tongue. I see now that my decision was not just a misjudgment of the law, but a failure to see the full picture, to see you for who you truly are. I cannot uphold this fine. The words are simple, but their weight is immense. In that moment, the power dynamics in the room shift completely. The woman, who had been seen as a mere object of judgment, is now acknowledged for the first time as a person of depth, of power, of incredible importance. The judge's eyes, once filled with authority and arrogance, are now filled with something new, humility. And the woman's expression softens, but there is no joy in her face. Only a quiet recognition that the battle is far from over. But the transformation does not stop there. As the case is reconsidered, the judge's ruling is overturned, the fine rescinded. Yet, the ripple effect of the woman's influence goes far beyond this single case. In the days that follow, the judge begins to investigate the systemic issues that had led him to make such a biased judgment. He reaches out to the community the woman represents, seeking counsel and understanding. He meets with activists, legal experts, and even members of her family, learning about the deep-seated issues that have long plagued their community and the legal system. He begins to push for change, real change. It starts with small steps, a public apology to the woman, acknowledging his mistake and the role his biases played in his decision. Then, he calls for reforms in the legal system, advocating for policies that would better serve marginalized communities and hold those in power accountable. His voice, once a symbol of authority, is now used to amplify the voices of those who have long been silenced. The woman's power, her quiet, steadfast strength, has sparked a revolution of sorts. It has forced the judge to confront his own shortcomings, to acknowledge his own complicity in a broken system. But it has also inspired him to take action, to fight for a justice that goes beyond the letter of the law and seeks to right the wrongs of history. In the courtroom, things have changed. The judge is no longer the man he once was, the man who handed down judgments without question. Now he is someone who understands the weight of his decisions, someone who is committed to ensuring that the scales of justice are balanced, not just by the law, but by empathy, compassion, and an understanding of the true meaning of justice. The black woman, whose quiet strength had once gone unnoticed, is now seen. Her legacy, her power, and her wisdom have transformed not just the judge, but the entire legal system. The ripples of her influence continue to spread, affecting everyone in that courtroom and beyond. Her power was not in defiance, nor in loud protests, but in the quiet certainty that comes from knowing the truth, no matter how hard it is to hear. The system, though far from perfect, begins to change. Slowly but surely, the seeds of justice are planted. And in time, perhaps, they will grow into something better. The case that once seemed like just another routine trial has rippled far beyond the walls of the courtroom, shaping lives, altering perceptions, and inspiring change in ways neither the judge nor the woman could have predicted. In the years that follow, the impact of that pivotal day echoes throughout both their lives and the communities they are part of, leaving an indelible mark on the legal system and on the broader societal consciousness. For the Black woman, the journey that began with the imposition of an unjust fine has transformed into something far greater than a legal battle. Her experience, her quiet yet unyielding stand, becomes a catalyst for her own personal growth and empowerment. She emerges not just as a victim of systemic injustice, but as a beacon of resilience and strength. The emotional toll of the trial was immense, but it also galvanized her to take action in ways she had never considered before. She becomes an advocate not just for herself, but for her community. Her voice, once silenced by the weight of prejudice, now carries the power of experience and wisdom, inspiring others to rise against the forces of systemic inequality. In the years that follow, she works alongside other activists and community leaders, pushing for legislative reforms, advocating for racial equity, and challenging the status quo. She uses her newfound influence to support organizations that fight for the rights of marginalized groups, becoming a mentor for young women who feel that their voices too have been silenced. Through her journey, she teaches others that true power is not about dominating others, but about finding the strength within to challenge the injustices of the world, even when it feels like the system is stacked against you. Her story spreads far and wide, becoming a symbol of hope for those who have long been overlooked. Her once quiet strength is now a rallying cry, a reminder that justice is not just a matter of legal proceedings, but a reflection of the values that we as a society choose to uphold. And in that legacy, her name becomes synonymous with justice, not as something that is doled out by a court, but as something that is fought for, something that is earned. For the judge, the transformation is even more profound. The man who once viewed his position as an unassailable authority now finds himself questioning the very foundation of his beliefs. The decision to rescind the fine was the first step, but it is the long journey that follows that truly alters the course of his life. The humbling realization that his initial judgment was clouded by his biases opens a door to a more empathetic and nuanced understanding of justice. He embarks on a personal journey of self-reflection, seeking to reconcile his past actions with his new worldview. As the years pass, the judge becomes known for his advocacy for reform within the judicial system. His rulings become more attuned to the systemic issues that affect marginalized communities. He actively works to mentor other judges, urging them to question their assumptions and to consider the broader implications of their decisions. His once rigid interpretation of the law softens into something more compassionate and just. He no longer sees his role as a gatekeeper of authority, but as a steward of fairness, striving to create a legal system that serves everyone, not just the privileged few. His transformation does not come easily. It is a journey fraught with internal conflict, as he grapples with the discomfort of confronting his own biases and the weight of his past mistakes. But as he moves forward, he finds that the more he learns, the more he understands how interconnected the struggle for justice is to his own humanity. He no longer separates the law from the people it is meant to serve. He embraces the understanding that true justice must be rooted in empathy, fairness, and the recognition of the lived experiences of others. In the broader community, the impact of the woman's empowerment and the judge's transformation is felt in ways both subtle and profound. The woman's case becomes a touchstone in the fight for racial justice, a case that sparks conversations about bias, inequality, and the intersection of law and power. Her influence extends beyond the courtroom, shaping the discourse around race and justice in the years to come. She becomes a symbol of the kind of change that is possible when individuals are willing to confront the systems that oppress them, when they refuse to be silenced by the weight of history.